protein is going to go where it is needed, and also not all protein is absorbed correctly. And so you need plant components, you need digestive aids that are found in plant foods to absorb the protein. So when you think about protein, you think about protein absorption rates, you think of the amino acid ratios, so what amino acids are present. Of course, you want the amino acids that are essential to be present first and foremost. And the more diverse you get with the diet, the more diverse you get with these amino acids.
Hello, Emer. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Today I'm the invisible one, but it's going to be all about you, so there will be different versions of this.
Great.
So please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers. Who is Emer and what you do, what's your company about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have founded a company called Bia Ability, and Bia is the Irish word for food, and ability, I think, speaks for itself. So I have over 7 years in the health and fitness industry and a degree in nutraceuticals for health and nutrition, which in normal terms is a functional food. So a food effective in contributing to overall health or healing and curing a disease. I'm also a certified health coach. So I incorporate that into clinic with Bia Ability. So I offer one-on-one consultations, kind of food log analysis, lifestyle recommendations that can be effective in helping people, I suppose, live healthier, better lives. I used to work in a health food store for 4 years and seen that people were frustrated with the kind of conventional health system where they'd go to their GP and they'd be prescribed a medication when that can only contribute to one factor into something that's multifactorial, which is health. And then in turn, because of this cycle, they would then come to a health food store where they would think that a pill would fix them. And again, that's a supplement or a herb is just one factor into something that's multifactorial. So people actually forget one of the huge contributing factors to our health, which is food, and its power and the power that it has on coding for different information. And that's why I founded the ability to help people and educate people on the power that food has on your life, my life. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly searching for the latest research, and I hope to bring that into my clinic and my practice as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. Thank you so much for that information about your background. I actually was one of those as well, people who start to go to a health store a lot, and
Yeah.
I had eczema, and it was really something that was a shift. And then I started to be more interested into diet, but I was still heavily addicted on sugar. And even if I was going to the health store, date syrup and all that stuff, I would just over consume as well. So
Absolutely.
craving.
Your cravings were there. And cravings are a huge part of, I suppose, how your metabolic function is happening at the moment, and then touching in on the microbiome as well. And it's not necessarily always your fault. A huge part of the degree that I studied is food science, and all of the factors that go into making a processed food, that include sugar and the sensory receptors that happen when we eat a food, and then the bacteria that crave a certain type of food. And so you could have an overgrowth of a bacteria in there that is craving the sugars, and then you're feeding it. And of course, supplements can help, but as you said yourself, there's something else going on, and it starts with the food itself. So yeah, the ability that food has on contributing to that disease and then helping you feel better about yourself and your health.
So what are the most important nutrients for overall health and well-being?
Yes, that's a brilliant question. And everybody that hears what I do always says, what should I be eating, or what are the most important nutrients? The short answer is everything. And then the long answer is, well, have a look at how you're feeling. And maybe you've got some chronic conditions in your life that is not, let's say, helping you live kind of an overall healthier life. So for example, Otto, in your case, it was eczema. So there are important nutrients that are then linked to eczema, and lower levels show up with people that experience eczema. Maybe omega-3s could be one of it. Maybe you should increase the level of polyphenols in your diet, which of course come from plants. You could have an imbalance in your gut. So that is increasing the level of diversity in your plant foods, and different things like that. So overall health is a complex one because we all have different health statuses. We all have different diseases that we suffer from. But there are links to certain nutrients that are lower in people that are also suffering from your condition, and some nutrients that are extremely therapeutic in helping with your condition. And let's say, for example, you're completely healthy and you don't have any health conditions and you're looking for a fitness goal, then there are nutrients that can contribute to you achieving that. So this is why I love the idea of functional foods. So what are the most important nutrients? Well, that's quite general. So specify the function you want the nutrients to do for you. I had a client recently who had low mood and depression. And so when we look at that, we look at levels of kind of fat. So what is the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in your diet? So when I do a diet analysis, I see, okay, normally, and studies show that the omega-6 ratio is always on the higher level. So let's decrease those kind of processed fats and let's get some more oily fish or chia seed and flaxseed for the omega-3s in the diet. So that's one example. Another one would be B vitamins tend to be lower in people suffering from, I suppose, mental health disorders. And that's because stress factors can radically reduce it. And then they want to look at either taking a supplement for a short period of time and improving their diet to reduce cortisol levels, blood sugar levels spiking, and also to kind of increase the level of therapeutic nutrients in the body as well. So that is the long answer and the short answer. I hope that's okay.
How can someone determine if they have a food allergy or intolerance?
Yes. So there's so many kind of research and tests and companies that can test this for you. So food allergies is going to be a very severe reaction to a certain type of food. So if you're in extreme suffering, especially when it comes to your gut health and you're having an extreme reaction, then you definitely should go get tested, and you can do that through the conventional system. You can go through your doctor with that. Now, in terms of intolerances, they're more specified tests and specific, and you can go with private food companies for that. There's a multitude of them in the country. And what I would recommend is nutritional therapy looks at these types of testings and kind of makes recommendations based on intolerances and things like that. Now, a person themselves can figure this out very easily by the diet alone when it comes to food intolerances and allergies. So you can do this through an elimination diet if you have the time and the energy and the mindset behind it, that it doesn't become, a chronic obsession. So you're doing an elimination diet to determine what foods cause an upset to the gut or to your overall health. So this is most commonly done with the typical allergens, so your eggs, your dairy, and your gluten. And you can do an elimination diet of those and then slowly start adding them in. If you, for example, don't have, you cannot access the expensive tests that are out there, you can find this out by yourself through an elimination diet. And there's so many gut books and things like that you can buy and you can follow, or you can go to a nutritional therapist or a functional nutritionist that can walk you through the steps as well, which can be even more helpful because you've got somebody explaining with their background and their knowledge as you go through those steps. So I think the first thing is to understand the difference to what is an allergy and what is an intolerance. And if you have an allergy, your symptoms and your reactions is going to be quite severe. And if you have an intolerance, that reaction over time can build up to a lot of discomforts. So definitely go and get tested if you believe that your symptoms are severe enough for an allergy. And then when it comes to a food intolerance, you can do this by yourself, but you can also get some kind of private companies to analyze this for you through stool sampling, so testing the poo, and then some blood testing as well. And, science keeps developing, and we're limited to the kind of resources that we have, and we're in a world that we're blessed with a multitude of resources. So it's very easy to go and do by yourself. But what I would recommend is to have peace of mind with it. So do speak to kind of a professional that knows what they're talking about and that can walk you through the steps. Because as I said, if somebody discovered that they have a gluten sensitivity and they believe that going gluten-free is going to fix all of their problems, that can spiral into even more problems. So less fiber in the diet, which is going to, reduce their microbiome because they've only went to gluten-free grains, which have less fiber or something like that. So yeah, the resources are definitely out there, and it's really exciting, and they keep getting more in depth, and they keep getting more advanced to this new area, which we call personalized nutrition, and that every body reacts differently to a different type of food, your inflammatory factors, your blood sugar levels, all of these types of foods. Some are more beneficial to one person and some are less beneficial to another person. And so you can speak to a nutritionist, or you can go online and look at all the different types of companies and make sure that it's reputable, and not just kind of a cheaper lab. So you want to look for certifications, maybe some doctors underneath it, nutritional therapists, have companies connected to their websites as well. So look on that too.
What are the common misconceptions about diet?
About diet? So there's so many. There's diet culture out there. I think when people think of a nutritionist or somebody in the nutrition field, they automatically assume that it's associated with weight loss. And that's because of television programs. It's also because of advertising all over social media. And food in the past was used as a tool to lose weight. But as science becomes developed, we realize that food is a tool that can be used in all areas of health, not just weight loss. Weight loss is the tiniest little, part of what nutrition can do for our bodies. So that's all what Be-ability is about. It's about the power of food, discover the power of food, and start with this, like the food first approach to health, and see the impact that can have everywhere, not just on weight loss. We're also fed the idea that, weight loss will achieve X, Y, and Z for your overall health. But what research has shown is that when people improve their diets in a certain way, that lots of different areas are affected by going down a nutrition path. Not all associated with weight loss. It's only a result of feeding your body with the nutrients that it needs. It's a result of feeding the body. Another misconception is, I think, macronutrients, that nutrition is all about macronutrients. So protein, carbohydrates, and fats, and maybe fiber here and there. This is not true. Food has millions and thousands of little chemicals, phytonutrients, polyphenols, vitamins, minerals, types of proteins, types of fats, and types of carbohydrates. So it's so much more than macronutrients. Another thing about nutrition is that people think that a product needs to be presented to them. So when they come to a nutritionist, or if they haven't been, and somebody said, or they heard somewhere, well, I need to increase protein in the diet. And because of advertising, they then turn to a protein supplement or a protein bar, guiding them in the direction of a heavily processed food. So protein powder, refined foods, protein bars, all of these types of foods, they're refined and they're heavily processed, and they can have knock-on effects to different areas of your health that may not be beneficial. So going back to whole foods then, when a food is in its whole state, minimally processed, it's going to contain exactly what you want it to contain. And as opposed to focusing on the macronutrient or the micronutrient even, that people need to start focusing on kind of food ingredients and food quality over macro or micronutrients. And the idea of a fad diet is going to save all their problems. So, for example, a gluten elimination diet, because they found that they're gluten sensitive, or they've self-diagnosed, or somebody told them on a podcast that they've listened to that they should go off gluten, that it's going to fix all their problems. It's not. You have to, if you have gut issues and you focus on removing gluten from the diet, but you're still not getting hydrated enough, you may not experience, the change that you want to experience. And that food and nutrition can be used as parts and a section, a huge section of healing from chronic diseases, every type of disease, including the common cold and flus that so many people are experiencing now. And also that it should be feared. So there's a lot of kind of fear mongering that's going on in the nutrition space, and you'll hear it on podcasts if you're interested yourself, that this is really bad for you or the other is really bad for you. For example, carbohydrates or gluten. There's a huge stigma over gluten or dairy, demonizing all these different types of foods, where it's not a one size fits all approach. Cutting out one type of food is not going to cure all your problems. It's just not. And that when you, so that's kind of my answer in a nutshell. Nutrition is not weight loss. It's so much more. Nutrition is not micronutrients or macronutrients as we has originally been given it. We should always come back to what the body fundamentally needs for proper functioning. And those guidelines are back to whole foods. I always go back to the idea of a whole food. So 30 different types of plant foods in the diet a week is recommended. That's just for normal functioning. So you just to live a normal life in not even optimal health, 30 different plant foods. So that could be vegetables, different types of fruit, nuts, seeds, plant foods. And that's key to a healthy microbiome. Another thing is, again, the 80-20% rule. Make sure that 80% of your diet is coming from whole foods, minimally processed, foods that you have control over, rather than, okay, well, I need to hit my protein requirements. I'm going to have a protein bar. Where is the whole food in that? You've been told you need to hit protein. So you automatically go to a company that have made that so easy for you. And that can cause kind of an effect of other problems. There could be fillers and additives to heavily processed foods. So, yeah.
If you could explain this to me, around half year ago, I stopped eating meat again, second time in my life. And as a result of that, I started to eat more vegetables and other good foods too, which I would consider more whole foods. And I was thinking I'm going to lose much more muscle mass, but I barely lost any muscles, to my surprise. And even with twice a week training, which I normally used to do like 5 times a week, I train only twice. But I was surprised by eating more vegetables and seeds, nuts, and all that kind of stuff that actually, sometimes I was like, oh, well, how much of the protein, like eggs or fish I had? I was like, I barely had like 60 grams, which before I would believe you need 140 or stuff like that. Could you explain this, how the quality of proteins will add to that overall needs, requirements, especially for athletes or for people like me, trainers who do fitness classes and we want to keep the muscle mass. So how to do it well and how and why it works like that.
Absolutely. So I would like to start off by, like, that's a brilliant question. And it's a question that has so much controversy in the area of nutrition. So nutrition is a science that's constantly evolving and we're always learning new things. So there is no correct answer in this. But when we think of a cell, so go back to the minuscule level of everything that exists in the world. On the outer layer of every single cell for plants and animals, there is protein and there is fat. So everything you eat is going to have protein and there's going to have fat in it. The more diverse you get with what you eat, the more diverse range of amino acids and proteins you're going to consume. Now, not all amino acids are necessary, and not all amino acids can be absorbed in the way that we can imagine them to be absorbed. So when I was in college, I did a module on performance nutrition. And one of the honed in factors, because performance nutrition is studied for athletes and there's a lot of money invested into it. So if an athlete eats more protein, what is their rate of muscle synthesis going to be? And that goes back to a system called mTOR, which I'm sure you've heard of before. And I'm not going to get into too much detail, but amino acids are one component of muscle building, albeit an extremely important part of building and growing a muscle. But there are other things that help with that. So carcinogenics are not going to contribute to muscle building. They're actually going to impose restrictions on it. Anti-inflammatories can help remove certain substances, and so your body can then produce protein. So they're found in a lot of plant foods. So you added more plant foods to your diet. That means you're diverse and your range of amino acids is going to be increased. Not only that, but you're going to have anti-inflammatory components added to you. So instead of the body using the protein that you were constantly consuming over 140 grams a day, protein's being used to fight off inflammation that you're causing in the body, to repair, different cells that you may have caused damage to because you're eating a lot of processed foods. Protein is going to go where it is needed, and also not all protein is absorbed correctly. And so you need plant components, you need digestive aids that are found in plant foods to absorb the protein. So when you think about protein, you think about protein absorption rates, you think of the amino acid ratios, so what amino acids are present. Of course, you want the amino acids that are essential to be present first and foremost. And the more diverse you get with the diet, the more diverse you get with these amino acids. So in this performance nutrition module, there's very little evidence to suggest that eating over 30 grams of protein per meal does any more additional benefit or has any more additional benefit than eating a meal with 60 grams of protein. You spoke on kind of cutting out meat. Cutting out meat entirely isn't always the answer. But what cutting out meat can do is reduce, because when fitness professionals especially, they go, okay, I'm going to have dinner. This is what I found. I'm going to have dinner and I need to have chicken because chicken is really high in protein and it's lower in fat. Okay. And so they build their meal around chicken. And they've got their chicken, they've got their protein, they've got their carbohydrates from rice. They've hit their calorie macronutrients. What about vegetables? They might have some broccoli on the side, and then they're in a fitness routine of just having chicken, rice, broccoli. So we're satisfying what we need in the body. That's not very diverse. The amino acid range isn't going to be very diverse. Meeting your 30 different types of plant foods a week, essential for your gut microbiome, it's not going to be met. So 30 grams of protein has been shown per meal, 3 meals a day, to be sufficient in protein and muscle synthesis. Although you're kind of a young man, you're not in a stage of your life where, you know, you're going to experience kind of muscle degradation on a higher level. You're not. So your protein intake just needs to suffice that of your, you know, maybe 1 gram, 0.8 grams of protein per body weight per week. And people also forget that protein isn't everything. So when somebody eats potatoes, for example, which is a perfect whole food, yes, it's a starchy vegetable, but when they eat potatoes, you eat 200 grams of potatoes, you're getting 8 grams of protein in there. Things that people don't realize, that plants have protein. You know, how does a bull put on all the muscle mass he puts on? He's not eating meat, he's eating plant foods. And then plant foods can contribute, as well as increased levels of microbiome, in breaking down lactic acids that is going to help you function better as an athlete, your blood flowing, all of these different components to functioning as an athlete rather than just looking at muscle synthesis. So, you know, liver function, microbiome, mood, all of these types of things. So yeah, protein is not the answer. It is in everything. And if you're hitting 30 grams of protein 3 meals a day, roundabout, you know, you're doing very, very well. And it doesn't have to come from meat. It can come from meat, and it can be very beneficial if you're having it from a fish source, because that comes from, let's say you have a can of sardines, you've got omega-3s with that. You've got your polyunsaturated fatty acids that you need for your brain. And I'm going to ask you this question, but what kind of meats were you eating? Was it the same over and over again? And what kind of plant foods did you have when you were eating, you know, this heavily kind of protein diet?
Yeah, so my kind of major diet back then was ribeye steaks and bread. So I think sometimes I would have 2 ribeye steaks for breakfast, 2 of them. I think that's 80 grams of protein right there. No carbs, just those 2 steaks. I would eat very little vegetables.
Yeah.
Occasional bananas, occasional pistachios, and very, very limited diet in diversity.
Yes.
Just out of convenience, out of laziness. And yeah, I'm just realizing how much better I could make it and how better I feel now. Just introducing different foods, especially fermented food, and I start to be more educated.
Wow.
And in fairness, I was really good in the past. And then before I realized, life gets busy and we shift and drift into different routines. And before I realized, I was in this very simple diet where I was just eating very few foods.
Yes.
And so now you explain it really well. And now I'm really surprised. Like, even though I stopped eating meat, first thing, I got a little bit leaner. Fat was kind of gone. It happened to me first time as well when I stopped eating meat, steaks, chicken, and all the stuff. I would still eat fish, let's say 3-4 times a week. I would have salmon or mackerels or sardines or sea bass or those. And so I did much more reading and watching the
type of food.
Yeah, I was watching more educational stuff about nutrition. I realized how important is the microbiome.
Absolutely.
And so the main thing is to live at least 100 years old and being functional and feeling good.
Yes.
That's why I believe that nutrition, healthy eating, and also appropriate exercise, mobility, cardio, strengthening as well, and then also, you know, like lowering stress, so mindfulness, and then a bit of yoga, mobility, and doing some saunas, doing some cold showers, which are available for everyone. Cold showers are available. So being able to be that kind of older guy when I'm going to be 40 years from now, when I'll be 80, I want to be active. I want to be being able to do things and feel good, not to need a stick and needing 10 prescriptions like my granny used to take or other old people. I don't want to be like that. I want to take the charge of my life and have the best life I can.
Absolutely.
And using the best tools.
Yeah.
Maybe you can expand on this, the whole lifestyle, if you want.
Absolutely. So Be-Ability focuses on the food first approach to health. You are, a personal trainer, you do nutrition for people, you do exercise for people. And when a client comes to you, you know that there's not one, routine that's going to suit everybody. So if you have a woman that's 65 years of age and she wants to prevent, putting on weight, or she wants to, build up arm strength because it's lowering faster in her. That routine for her is not going to be the same that you give a guy in his, 20s or 30s, because the ability is different. Just like our body's ability is completely, different in different areas. So this kind of personalized nutrition approach is super important. You talk about kind of lifestyle as a whole. We know that stress depletes our B vitamins, which are important for mood and energy function and a plethora of so many other things in our body. So stress itself contributes to a depletion in our nutrients. They take them up, they suck them up, and then it's not there then for other normal bodily functions. Meditation can increase the diversity of microbiome and the availability of microbiome in your gut. That's just the gut-brain axis. There's evidence for this out there now. Exercise has been proven recently to be an anti-inflammatory. So if, you have people and people will say to me, oh, but my sister can eat, chocolate, but when I eat it, I get spots and I feel crap. Well, we don't know what your sister's doing. Maybe she's exercising more. Maybe she is meditating more. So if your sister, has more anti-inflammatory behaviors in her lifestyle, like exercise or meditation, then of course food is going to affect her body differently, because she has areas of health coming from, a multitude of sources and options. So again, food isn't the only part of health that people need to consider. You've seen firsthand the effect that exercise and small tweaks in the diet that you've recommended to people have on everything. But also what comes with personal training and health coaching, what I do is somebody to hold your hand. So a sense of community, that you're not doing it by yourself, that you're not going crazy with ideas. Right, if I do cryotherapy, if I do sauna this time of the week, my blood pressure will be reduced. Well, maybe you have chronic stress and chronic cortisol levels. Are you doing any meditation? And people can bring new ideas. And I learn so much from my clients as much as I learn from reading. So it's all areas of life that contribute to health. But what I want to focus on with people is the food first, because nutrients are what we're made of. And there's this old saying that you are what you eat. But I think you are what you eat is a small component of it, but it is so important, because when people, environment is a huge thing. So you might have stresses that you cannot control, traumas you can't control, situations you can't control. But what you can control is the power of what you put into your plate, on your plate. You can decide, like, every meal that you make for yourself is an opportunity to get more amazing healing things onto that plate that can benefit your body. And you have control over that. People don't always have control over, their exercise routine. They don't always have control over stresses in their environment. But you do have control over what you put on your plate. And one of the first areas of control that a child shows to their parents is, I don't want to eat that food because I'm taking my own personality. You can't force me to eat the food. And people make themselves suffer so much. Let's say restricting diets, not eating, skipping meals. when you should really look at your food as an opportunity to improve your health, to make the next 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours better than the hours just gone before. And let's say, for example, you have a day where, I don't know, you have a croissant for breakfast and you have that dip in the middle of the day and you're like, oh, I know I shouldn't have eaten that. Your next meal is an opportunity to change that. And take it meal by meal. Just like when we're trying to get a project done, you take it step by step. You don't look at it and you're going, oh my God, I didn't get this done now, so the whole project is thrown out of proportion. We can't look at food that way. It's an opportunity to put amazing things into our body all the time. I was reading studies the other day that wild blueberries, I've become obsessed with them. I'm eating them every day. I'm not going to go down the path where I'm only eating wild blueberries as my berries, because again, diversity is important. But, the discovery of how they remove metals from the body, and, I drink tap water, and I try and filter it as best I can, but it's going to be there. I wear makeup, so there's going to be, toxins in my body. And my granddad had Alzheimer's, so I don't want to get that. So, I'm protecting my brain as much as I can. And I'm looking at, brain boosting foods. And that's so exciting. So when I put, something into my porridge in the morning, wild blueberries, I know they have an amazing effect on brain health. And that's really exciting. And if you start looking at food in that way, as opposed to going, right, I need to get, 140 grams of protein in. How do I do this? Let's focus on the macronutrients, You take away so much of its power. So I love how you introduced, more diverse foods into your body, and then your body responded appropriately. It got rid of what it doesn't need, maybe some excess fat. It got rid of maybe a lot of, gunk lying around in your gut. Maybe you noticed that you had more stools coming more frequently, because those plant foods are digestive aids as well. So you need to aid the digestive system. Protein is quite hard on our stomachs. I think everybody that eats a high protein diet suffers with some type of gut disorders. You need a lot of enzymes to digest that much steak in each meal. And foods like pineapple can help with that. So that's one plant food that have enzymes that are going to help with that. So yeah, diversity is key. And by removing meat from your diet, it opens up an area where you can add so much more. That doesn't go to say that you can never have it again. You can enjoy it if you go out to a restaurant. Okay, I'm going to have a beautiful piece of steak now. I'll have some, more plant foods on the side, but it's not a part of your diet that makes it simple and that makes it one color only. So like a colorful diet is really important. Yeah. So we were discussing, so Diana was saying that, when she has her protein shake after exercising, should she put 1 scoop or 2 scoop? And is the second scoop, which goes over 30 grams of protein, a waste? And my answer to that was, it depends, which isn't very informative. But the research kind of limits muscle building and protein synthesis to 30 grams of protein per sitting, 30 to 40 grams of protein. It is proven that if you go above 20 grams of protein, there will be increased synthesis of muscle mass per meal. And that's focused on muscle building alone. When you look at athletes and they're intaking maybe 60 to 80 grams of protein perhaps per meal, they are different to you. So studies on athletes are always super interesting because you're looking at individuals from top performance, top physiological performance. And we have to ground ourselves and think, okay, we're not top physiological performers. We are people who are exercising 3, maybe to 5 times a week. And we want to exercise for health reasons and we want to build muscle because we want to feel stronger, or maybe it's for, body image reasons. We are not athletes. We're not training twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. an athlete's metabolic rate is going to be higher because they're breaking down. I'm sure you know this, when you're building a muscle, you break it down, you build it back up. So because they're conditioned to do that at a faster rate, their synthesis of muscle mass and protein synthesis is going to be different to Diana's. And just, again, if you have the protein shake, that's amazing. But again, diversity when it comes to protein. So as opposed to looking at it from, okay, well, I know I get protein from this shake. Maybe if you stop the shake for a while and you said, where else can I get 30 grams of protein when I build a meal? So I have some squash, I have a shake with spirulina in it, I have maybe some potatoes, I have some broccoli, I have some leafy greens, and I have some sardines. As opposed to the specific amino acid range in the protein shake alone, now you're getting a different amino acid range from this big plate. Not only are you getting a different in amino acids from this big plate, you're getting other components that are going to help with your muscle synthesis. So omega-3s fatty acids, your maybe small levels of creatine from the fish and the bones in the fish. You're also getting, polyphenols that are going to help with inflammation, help get rid of that lactic acid, which is going to, of course, help with performance and recovery. And carbohydrates, which is going to restore your glycogen levels, which is 100% necessary, again, to build muscle. Because if you're just eating that protein alone, there's no carbohydrates in it, you'll break that protein down and you'll transfer it into glucose so you can refill those glycogen levels. Whereas if you have a meal with carbohydrates as well, you're using the protein going towards muscle synthesis and making immune cells for, fighting off infection and rebuilding those cells into something that are stronger. So the recommendation there would be to, instead of focusing on a shake and the protein alone, focus on a meal, and you'll get so much more from the meal than you will from the shake. You'll get so much more from nuts than you will from the shake. Again, they're a whole food. They also contain fats and minerals and things like that. Whereas the whey isolate is only going to contain that isolated, refined ingredient that serves the protein function. It's not serving a multitude of functions, which is what muscle building is, which is what, athletic performance is. It's a multitude of lots of different things.
The question is how to eat healthily on a budget.
Yes.
And would you throw some samples of breakfast, snacks,
Absolutely.
lunch and dinner? What would you recommend?
Yeah.
Which is not overly complicated.
Yeah.
Which, regular people who are not nutrition fanatics can apply today.
Absolutely. What a fantastic question. And I was just working on this. I'm going to release a short course called Back to Basics when it comes to nutrition. And it's so much simpler than people think. So when you think about nutrition when it comes to a budget, what people do is sometimes they go and they try and find the cheapest whey supplement or the cheapest supplement of some sort to increase the protein in their diet, or they think that will make them healthier. So what you need to do when you're on a budget is you fill up your, in America, pantry or your cupboards with herbs and spices. So you have that as your base. You then have maybe 1 or 2 types of oil as your base. For me personally, it is coconut oil and extra virgin olive oil. And I have that there. So you need to invest a little bit first. But every shop is not going to be this expensive. So you have your base things that are going to last in your cupboards or in your pantry. And then you have things that you buy every week fresh. So you have maybe 2 types of oil, and you want a good quality one. So you can get extra virgin olive oil, sometimes even as the same price as vegetable oil. Then, so you've got your oils. Then you want your consider your carbohydrates, so your high quality grains. So people are lazy, and I understand that. And so when people are on a budget, everybody knows that rice is a relatively kind of cheap ingredient, and they buy the microwavable packets. And they have, 4 of them, 5 of them in their cupboards. Well, how about maybe instead of doing that, because they're like €2 each, you buy a packet of normal rice, and then you have some quinoa or you have some buckwheat. So you got 3 different types of grain that you can cook. You don't have to cook it all at once. You can have it that you can, you cook it once and then you have it for 3 days. As opposed to having those microwavable packets, which are more processed, more added ingredients. And then, so you consider your grains. So for example, for breakfast, one of my favorite breakfasts, and I think a lot of nutritional experts would agree with this, is maybe oats. And you can do so much with this. You can make it to your liking. You can do overnight oats. Then you have maybe some berries that you add to it. So you can buy those in the freezer range, which are relatively cheap, and they will melt down when you heat up the porridge. You then want to get more range of fiber. So you have an omega-3s into your breakfast. So you could have chia seed and flaxseed, again, to go into the cupboards that you don't have to buy every week, but they're there anyways. So these are grains that you have, and you don't have to buy every week, but you fill them up as you go. And then you look at your fresh fruits and vegetables. So instead of sticking to, okay, I eat broccoli every 3rd day with this type of meal, you look at a diverse kind of range of different fruits and vegetables, and you buy those kind of every 3 days or every 4 or 5 days. And try and build your meals around the vegetables that you buy. So first and foremost, you don't waste them and waste your money. So you've got peppers in the fridge and you see that there's a couple of wrinkles on them. What can I do with peppers? And maybe look up a recipe for that. And then when it comes to your protein, consider high quality proteins. So people believe that they need a whey source to quickly get in their protein requirements. Nuts and seeds are relatively cheap because they're calorifically dense, and they're nutrient dense. So when you're snacking, you've got nuts and seeds in the cupboard that you can also get. So oats, nuts and seeds, proper grains, herbs and spices, because they are plant foods and they are healing and beneficial in so many ways. And then when you're looking at your fruit and vegetables, diverse range. So I always say maybe 7 per week of fruits and 7 per week of vegetables. So that could be spinach, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts for vegetables, carrots and peppers. So that's 7. The next week after that, you change it up. Maybe you add asparagus instead of broccoli. Then your 7 fruits and vegetables, if you're kind of working out, berries, bananas, amazing pre-workout food. They're relatively cheap. Oranges, whatever's in season. So look at what's in season. And buy according to that when you're starting out. And as time moves on, you'll go into a routine of trying out different plant foods. You'll know what you have in the cupboard. And another really important thing, which comes down to the psychology, which is, of course, a huge component of why we eat and when we eat and how we eat. Go shopping when you've just had your dinner or you've just had your lunch. Don't go shopping when you're hungry. Don't go shopping when you're at a pit. You had a pastry because you had a coffee with a friend and you spiked your blood sugar levels from the coffee and the pastry. And that's not always bad if you're not doing it on a regular basis. But then you're in a dip, and what is your body going to look for? Probably the processed food, because the food industry have done the work for you. You're going to be going through the vegetable aisle. Oh my God, these carrots look amazing. No, because they release more slowly. Your body's very intelligent. Go to the salty foods. Maybe I'm dehydrated. Go towards the sweet foods because I feel like a low mood and I want that conversion, that quick conversion of tryptophan into 5-HTP, which happens when you eat processed foods and sugar foods. So go shopping when you're full. And we're so lucky, shops used to be open for housewives back in the day from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Shops are open until like 9, 10 at night. So if you're going shopping at that time, normally you're not as hungry. So, use the facilities that are there for you. The governments have tried to bring in health implications. So when you go straight into a supermarket, you see all the fruits and vegetables first. That's where you start. You start with the fruits and vegetables. You've got the grains. So check off your grains before you go shopping. Do I need more oats? Do I need more quinoa? Do I need more rice? And if you don't, you're going to be saving money. Maybe you can spend more money on fruit and vegetables. So let's put it into bullet points then, because that was kind of a lot. So consider your grains that you have there all the time so you can kind of add to your meals. Know how you're going to build a meal. So you need your non-starchy vegetables. I call it the Be Ability Build a Meal sequence. So when you're building a meal, you should look at non-starchy vegetables first, high quality protein second, and essential fats third. And then when you're adding something else to it, you want to have things, they're normally slightly processed, rice, quinoa, and they're in the cupboard ready to go that you can add to it as well, maybe for extra energy or fiber. And when you focus on the non-starchy vegetables, the high quality protein and the essential fats first, you've got your fundamental needs met, and everything else is just a bonus. It can make you happier. You like the warm feeling of rice or something. You don't actually need it, but it tastes good. And so when you have to be prepared. So, so first of all, go shopping when you're not hungry. Second of all, have a plan. So make it specific to each meal. Know your food habits. So if you're a snacker, make sure you have some good quality foods for snacks. Fruits and nuts are always my go-to. Fruit and nut. You don't need to do any preparation for them. They're right there. Grab them. In season is always going to be tastiest. So I don't know if anyone's ever eaten an orange in the summertime. Disgusting. Like, it would put anyone off oranges. And sometimes I remember I recommended to a client recently where I said, why don't you try oranges? Oranges are disgusting. They have that horrible bitter taste. I said, oh, well, when last did you eat an orange? Oh, summertime. Well, they're not in season in summer, so they're going to taste funny. Apples are in season right now. They're amazing at the minute because they're in season. So think seasonally. And then have your plan around your meals. And once you have the plan, it's going to be easier to shop on a budget. Whereas people think that food can be super expensive, but not if you're organized. It's like everything in life. Because what's going to end up happening is if you don't know what you're eating for each meal and how you're going to, fit in snacks and things like that, you'll end up buying as you go. And when you buy as you go without the preparation, it's going to be more expensive. The sandwich in Starbucks is going to be a lot pricier, close to €10 than, the meal that you can make at home. The croissant is going to be a lot pricier than the apple and the almonds that you ground for your kitchen. So if you have preparation first, you're going to spend less money on food and you're going to get better quality food into you as well. And then you can save your money for other things like a meditation app or going to do a fitness class. And healthy food doesn't mean that you have to buy, yes, they're helpful. Like I have spirulina and it's lasting forever. You can get that organic, spirulina in Lidl or Aldi. Things are so much more accessible than they used to be. It doesn't have to be super complicated. But diversity is key. So considering your grains, considering your fruit and vegetables, seasonal, and don't go shopping when you're hungry.
You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much. Yeah. This is amazing. Now, you mentioned spices, and I heard recently I was listening to someone on a podcast, some really well educated nutritionist himself. I forgot his name now, but he spoke about how to improve your microbiome, and he mentioned these 30 plants. But he said that it's not just greens or something; it's nuts and plant-based. It's all. But then he mentioned herbs and spices, and you mentioned it as well. Can you describe again why and what's so good about them? Like they're so easily accessible.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it ties back into the thing that we spoke about earlier. So diversity is key, and herbs and spices are plant foods. And I heard a while ago that you don't need, food should be the flavor. The plant itself should be the flavor. You don't need to add in things to give it flavor. And if the flavor comes from an aromatic or a food like straight from garlic, that flavor is exactly healing components associated with it. So that, let's say we take garlic as a herb, for example. Now, fresh garlic is better, but those smells retain in the powdered garlic. And those smells that retain, like those sulfur components, are hugely beneficial towards your liver. So that smell, sulfur, the body's very smart, knows that sulfur kind of smell and the aromatics that come with garlic is associated with the sulfur components in it, which of course then are associated with improvement of different conditions. So when you have a smell and a color associated with a different type of a plant, there are components in it and chemicals in it that are very important for your health. When you take turmeric, which is a spice used for curries, and I encourage everybody to add it to their diet if they can. There's a huge range of people, I think we spoke, taking a curcumin, a turmeric supplement. And our body is really intelligent. So when people make curries, they add turmeric and they add black pepper and they add lots of different things. Now we consider the supplement that people are taking. They added a spice, turmeric to a curry. They smell it. They think this would be really nice with black pepper. Human body tells us, let's put turmeric and black pepper together. Science now tells us you can't absorb the curcuminoids in turmeric without black pepper. So herbs and spices and being creative with food and what smells good to you is very effective in telling you what your body needs. And when you take a herb and you take a spice, you know that it comes from a plant. It's not Chinese salt or MSG, changing the physiochemical receptors in your mouth to crave it more. It is something that comes from a plant, and the taste alone and the aromatic and the aroma that it gives is a healing component in itself. It smells that way because a component makes it smell that way. It tastes that way because a chemical makes it taste that way. And more often than not, that chemical is very, very beneficial to your body. And they are different plant foods that you can add for diversity. They're really easy to add in. So when you experiment with whole foods like curcumin by itself and you make up your own curry sauce, your body will tell you, I'm more of a I'm more of a black pepper kind of person. Or there's some people that love chili, and and cayenne pepper and things like that are, proven to give maybe a slight metabolic boost to the body. Maybe your body needs that, and so therefore you prefer those types of food. But we have to remember how intelligent our senses are, and not to be, and when you stick to those whole food spices and herbs, it's more powerful than allowing a food industry to do that for you, because your body tells you a lot about what you need in that moment. It's very funny because, like, let's say we take chocolate, for example, and people are craving chocolate. The cocoa itself contains a lot of magnesium. And so sometimes when people crave chocolate, it might be because they're actually craving what comes with the cocoa, which is magnesium. So just remember that you're like those senses and the herbs and spices, especially what comes from a natural source, are going to be beneficial. And also your craving is telling you something about something. So Oto, when we go back to your severe sugar cravings, for me, looking at that, I would say, okay, we've got a severe, maybe a little bit of insulin resistance going on. We've got some a huge imbalance in, your blood sugar spikes, and we need to get that under control. So those cravings is your body telling you something that either it's, you need to kind of fix that there. It's not right. So you being your own doctor is what we want to teach, and you can teach that through food. There's been studies of goats or even cows and dairy cows. I grew up in a dairy farm. They're given this diet that they should, follow, and it tries to meet everything that satisfies their gut microbiome and their happiness and their health. And if you've been on a dairy farm, the cows are very happy, especially if they're out in the field, and they love being out. And the farmer will do everything to make them as happy as possible, because if they're happy as possible, they're going to produce the most milk. And then if you take them from that kind of system, you put them out into a field by themselves and you let them just roam by themselves, their senses tell them, we go eat dandelion now, because that gives us certain components. It has a different smell and a taste to it, and we need that in our body. One of the animals with the strongest immune system in the world is goats. And they know exactly what plants to eat from their smells and their aromas. And they can all be crushed down and broken down into different herbs and spices. And their senses can tell them what they need and where they need. And they will themselves go and eat what they need and where they need. And those senses of ours has been kind of dampened by the food industry. So, for example, high salt diets contribute to kind of the body only craving maybe salt and MSG. And so it dims the receptors of other receptors on the tongue. At the top, you've got sweet. In the middle, you've got umami, which is MSG. At the sides, you've got salt. And bitter is at the back. So when you eat a food, the food industry will gear it towards a satisfactory response immediately. So when people are testing for foods in labs before they go out on the market, it's going to hit that perfect response that the majority of the population is going to experience. And over time, it can dampen our own natural scent and feeling of what we need to eat. So, but the really cool thing about that is you're not subject to it. So even if you have, I'm a savory person, I love salty things, your senses on your tongue replace themselves every 2 weeks. So it's really interesting when you look at a diet and you look at when somebody comes to you, they do really good for the first 2 weeks and they start eating different plant foods and things like that, because their taste receptors are changing on their tongue. So if you reduce the level of highly processed foods in your diet, you open up the taste receptors to what you actually biologically and you yourself know that you need. You are your own doctor, and herbs and spices are a way into knowing not only just to flavor food and, increase the urge to want to eat more and the smell and the, pleasure that comes with food, but also a way into knowing that maybe I need this in my diet. Maybe I need more inflammatory herbs and spices, which you can get. And if people are now taking herbs and spices and they're putting them into, tablet form to increase the level, instead of just 1 teaspoon, now you've got, 5, 6, 7 teaspoons in one tablet. That just goes to show you that now they're interfering with a medical condition to cure you on a higher level. But if you just do this every day, you're adding a different herb and spice, that all builds up over time. Those components all build up over time. And it just goes to show you the power of food. And when it's in its own form that you can then use to create what you want, you're going to benefit yourself in the best way, as opposed to somebody telling you to do it.
I had this before where I felt drawn to the different foods. For example, there maybe once a year I have a huge desire for oranges. Just recently I had a mustard desire. I was like, this whole grain mustard I bought somewhere in Tesco downstairs.
Yes.
And I felt like adding it to my meals. And the other day I'm just eating it, and because I got used to this chat GPT, AI help, so I'm eating my meal. I was like, okay, so please tell me I even ask it, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ask it, please.
Absolutely.
And just to be polite, I was like talking to a person.
In case the AI has feelings.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked the benefits of mustard, and it basically one of those major ones was anti-inflammatory, high, I think, selenium and other stuff.
Wow.
And I was like, and omega-3 oils. I was like, I almost thought like a mustard is like just a little flavor, that's it. But
No.
But now I'm realizing. So my question to you is that what improves this intuition that we know? You mentioned something there, but would other factors of our diet or nutrition habits sort of interfere with our food intuition and being our own doctor, having intuitive sense of like for healthier choices for ourselves to influence how we feel? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. There are types of food that influence our own inherent sense of what we need. And this goes back to the whole food versus processed food. Processed food is designed in a way that's really intelligent to stimulate a response. Psychologically, the human brain over time puts emphasis on sugar and fat. So when you have a food that's high in sugar and fat, we've got, it's not only salt, sweet, bitter, umami, and sour, the senses receptors in our tongue. There's fat there as well. When a food has been processed in a way to satisfy everything that we could ever imagine can come from food, short term, that of course is going to influence our choice to go back to that food again. So when you consider, let's just take one of the world's most popular foods at the moment, which is pizza. Pizza is an ultra processed food. But oh my God, is it amazing. Like, I don't think there's anyone that says, I don't like pizza. When you change your receptors and you change and you start listening to what your body needs, you're like, yeah, that seems a bit heavy for me. I actually don't really want it. So what it has, it's got that, depending on what you like, the crispy base with the melted cheese on top with the tomato sauce. So you've got so much, you've got this burst of physiochemical reactors, sensors, chemostatic receptors in your mouth that go, oh my God. You've got the fat receptors that are like, wow, to the cheese. You've got the bitter and the sour tomatoes receptors that are reacting to the tomatoes. You have got the sugar that's reacting to the starch at the bottom of the base of the pizza. So that makes you lazy in a sense. And it also disrupts the microbiome because you're not coming with all the healing components that a normal ingestion of all of those calories contain. So it's not a nutrient-dense food, it's a nutrient-empty food. So it satisfies everything that it should satisfy in the mouth, but that doesn't match up in the gut microbiome. So the carbohydrates normally should be like fruit and vegetables, where we mostly should get our carbohydrates from. And what comes with that is B vitamins, more phytochemicals, and that's not matching up. Some anti-inflammatory properties. And then you've got the tomato. What also comes with that? Vitamin C, vitamin E, beta-carotenes that help the skin. Yes, there's going to be some components because it's so heavily processed. It's not matching up either. And then you've got the cheese, fat. So, that's a lot of omega-6s. So it's hitting all of these things that are perfect in the mouth and releases a serotonin rush, but it doesn't match up. So your tongue then craves that response that is perfectly aligned to how it's been designed. And the body's going to crave that more. So you're going to crave that processed food more. And it closes off your own intuition. I was in Thailand, I was here discussing, and we get lazy. Like habits, motivation, you can't rely on motivation. You just can't. So, and we are, all animals go towards something that's the easiest option. So on a dairy farm, cows come in, they know that they're going to get the tastiest nuts when they're being milked. So what's the easiest option for them to get the tastiest thing ever? They go and they walk themselves, even without even, the farmer going to them. They walk themselves to the machine and they know, okay, I'm going to get the nuts. So this is the easiest thing for me to have the best sense. Monkeys over in Thailand were dying because they were eating plastic, which is really sad. But they were picking up things from the trash and they were eating the senses. And these are long-tailed crab eaters. They don't go and eat crabs anymore because they've become accustomed to getting an easier option. So what I would say is reduce the drive towards the easier option of the food. So if something satisfies everything all at once, and you don't have to work for it, you didn't cook it, you didn't smell it, you didn't chop it, and it's just there right in front of you, you're missing so much of what actually food can do.
So Emer, here's another question, and that is females' period and how they might experience sugar craving, that all famous chocolate craving that we all heard a few times, I guess, and then the lack of energy, moodiness. So how it all works?
Yeah, of course. This is such an amazing question because, and this where it comes back to the 80-20% rule. So when you're in your final stages of your period cycle, your hormones are dropping on a rapid level. So the hormones that you experience, so if you don't fall pregnant after you ovulate, those hormones that made the egg and that maintained it and held up your womb are now falling. So you're going to experience your period. So you're coming into that dip in the period cycle, okay? When this happens, your body needs extra calories and extra support. So there's so many components to the cravings that come with that. During this period, we feel lower in ourselves. We feel less confident. Factually, you will feel like you will experience a lower sense of confidence in your whole body image. The beautiful thing about that is, like yin and yang, when you then ovulate, get the feels back up, you love yourself again, you're preparing to go and find a mate, you're pretty much in heat, and you're like, I'm gorgeous, this is what men is attracted to, pretty much literal just confidence. I'm confident, I'm hot or whatever. So it's coming, it's just temporary. So the first thing that you should understand about it is temporary. Just because you feel shit about how you look, excuse my French, in this phase of your cycle is so normal, because it's really sad. Your body is punishing you for not having a child, and in every way. So you are going to need kind of extra calories in this, because then when you bleed, you're going to lose iron, you're going to lose, nutrients through your bleeding cycle. And so eat, if your cravings come up, eat. You're probably not going to train as effectively as you would on other forms of your cycle. That doesn't mean that you don't have to move, If you have chocolate cravings, have some dark chocolate. It's not a one size fit all. It's not going to be there next week. If you restrict, it's going to cause binging, and then you're going to feel worse about yourself. First and foremost, in this stage of your cycle, it's temporary. You're going to feel sexy. You're going to feel more supported. Actually, in a week's time, in 2 weeks' time. So first of all, it's temporary. So if you do eat more, in this period of your cycle, that's okay. You're going to need more support in this period of your cycle. That's sociological, that's psychological. And that's all associated with food. So what are your comfort foods, If it is chocolate, fine, have the chocolate. It's only a temporary period in a whole 30-day cycle. A man's cycle is one day. They have their cycle at nighttime and then it refreshes itself the next day. So that period of your cycle is temporary. So if you are having cravings, don't feel too bad about it. There are ways that you can reduce the negative effects of eating like a lot of sugar. So for example, I remember I had, as I said, I love Magnum almonds. Thank you. What is that? The company that makes them, they made them just perfectly. Love them. And sometimes I like have a craving for ice cream maybe during this period of my cycle, and I'll have it. And I know that I'm probably not going to crave it next week if I let it go too far. So have it as a dessert. That reduces the spike. That's going to keep it in the healthy level so you don't trough and you feel even worse again. So have these things as a dessert. Have it as a pre-workout. If you're craving it, have your chocolate and go and work out. Why? Because you're going to use up that energy. You're going to use up that sugar. Your blood sugar levels are not going to spike because it's going to be sent directly to the muscles that you're actively using. So have it as a dessert. If you want to reduce the effects of it, have it as a dessert. Have it before you exercise. And don't punish yourself for it.
How can people with dietary restrictions such as veganism or gluten-free make sure they are getting all the nutrients they need?
Yeah, what a fantastic question. So veganism is quite a restricted diet and maybe not so much anymore. But you are taking out the diversity that you could possibly have. Now, for some people, becoming vegan actually increases the diversity because they were relying on, plant foods or animal foods, and because animal foods contain kind of a lot of macronutrients in the one setting, whereas the plant foods contain more micronutrients in the one setting. Sometimes veganism can open up areas of more diversity, and we've already discussed more diversity equals better health. Now, veganism, the concern with veganism is protein and perhaps maybe creatine. So for athletes, for example, if you are vegan or vegetarian, creatine is going to be 50% more effective because you're not getting it from a dietary source. B12 is extremely important, although I argue that B12 is important for everybody, vegan or not. And so supplementation will be required. Diversity is highly important. And when people consider going vegan, what they do is to transition into that, in their mind, maybe ethical diet. So as opposed to it being for health, sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's ethical reasons. Just maintain open-mindedness, because you can remove a lot of social and psychological aspects to food. You can separate yourself from eating with people in different moments, and that can cause, more stress and disrupt your microbiome. Ensure, diversity. Grains are going to be your, source of proteins, and to really avoid the highly processed stuff. If something says, vegan chicken, it's not vegan chicken. It's not even anything that you need. It's chemicals. It's food chemistry. It's not food. It's food chemistry. There's a huge difference there. So if you're getting your protein sources, get it from nuts, get it from seeds, get it from quinoa and grains and potatoes and foods that are whole foods. So consider your whole foods when you're vegan and vegetarian, as opposed to just immediately turning to food chemistry, vegan cheese, vegan chicken, vegan beef. Definitely do that. And then consider your supplements. So go to a nutritionist, a functional nutritionist, if you have some, health issues before you change to this diet. There is very concrete evidence that a vegan vegetarian diet has a lot of health benefits to going on it, and that would probably be due to the increase of diversity of plant foods that we need. Gluten-free, again, stick to whole foods. Every diet that you go on, whether it's ethical reasons or let's say, for example, you have an allergy and you're celiac, stick to whole foods. So if you're eating a food like a wrap that is a gluten-free wrap, look at the ingredients list. Do you understand all of the ingredients in the list? And if you don't, it's not a whole food, it's food chemistry. So be aware what is food, whole food, and what is food chemistry. Because these highly processed foods that try to replicate what you already had in your previous life may not be fully, beneficial to you. So when you're going to an extreme diet like veganism, or you're going to a gluten-free diet or a dairy-free diet, if it's for an allergic reason, consider your whole foods. If it's for an ethical reason, consider your whole foods. Remember what is a food and what is food chemistry. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
What are the key differences in consuming organic food versus non-organic food? Yeah. And I'm actually pointing out to the chemicals that are from petroleum industry and other chemicals. Absolutely. You can also expand it to nitrates and conservants in the food, and explain people why they could consider organic or non-processed options.
Yes, absolutely. So organic versus non-organic. There is one disadvantage to organic food. That's cost. That's the only disadvantage to organic food. So if you're a person that's trying to be healthy and healthier and make some sustainable habits, it's not always going to be best just to choose organic food, because you can have organic chocolate, okay? And you could just focus on organic processed foods if you wanted to. There is concrete evidence that people who eat more organic foods have less cases of cancer and chronic diseases. However, again, like all food, there's psychological, sociology, all those types of things considered. So if you think of an organic shopper, they normally tend to be super health focused, and they're already considering their food from farm to fork. And if you consider your food from farm to fork, where is it processed? How is it processed? What processing methods does it go through? And how does it get to my plate, into my fork, and function it has on my body? If there is more chemicals added in the process, even if it's like spraying apples so we don't get pesticides and herbicides, so we don't get, unwanted bacteria, yeasts, molds growing in the food before it gets to consumer. This is extremely advantageous to people because it increases the accessibility of feed, so we can get apples all year round. There's less food wastage with conventional because it reduces the fact that the food might be destroyed. However, there are new pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals added to food that are not added to the organic food industry that haven't been tested on animal or human studies as well as it should be. So it's seeping into our food system. So there's also a really interesting, I have a post on this on my Instagram. It's called the Dirty Dozen. And there are foods that are associated with conventional farming to more levels of pesticides, herbicides, and harmful, bacteria. And then there's foods like bananas and lemons that are not as bad if you don't have them organic. So have a look at that. Google it. It's called the Dirty Dozen. They're the foods that if you wanted to start with organic, you start with them. And then you don't have to feel so bad about the others. If you've got an autoimmune condition, organic might be a better way to go. So consider the function that you want the food to go. So organic isn't always the answer for health, but it definitely helps.
How can people use nutritional information such as food labels and ingredient lists to make informed choices about what they eat?
Yeah, really good question. So food labeling is something that the European Union or the FDA in America has put as a legal requirement that food companies have to have on their food products. So in Europe, the legal requirements is the kilocalories per 100 grams, the fat, the saturated fats. They can go into more detail if they want, but it's just fat, saturated fat. It's carbohydrates, sugars, protein, and fiber, and of course then salt. And so that's looking at food from a macronutrient perspective, which is subject to errors. So it's an average. If you only look at macronutrients in food, that leaves a very boring diet because, as we said, diversity is key. It comes with plant chemicals, polyphenols, flavonoids, carotenoids, all these types of healthy chemicals. What I would tell a person who wants to start understanding food is look at the ingredients list. How many ingredients is on that? So when you look at butter versus, spreadable low-fat spread, the spreadable low-fat spread has sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, monotriglycerides of fat, some palm oil in there, some salt, some fillers, some stabilizing agents, some gums to, keep it, which food is going to be healthier for the body? The one with less ingredients, of course, because that's just the idea of a whole food again. That just comes back to food in its natural form. So look at the ingredients list. The less, the better. Do consider your macronutrients as well. And most of the best foods don't have packages on them. They don't need to be advertised. They don't need the micronutrients. When you buy peppers or carrots, there's no micronutrients on the packets. When you buy rice, there might be because it's in a package and it's slightly processed. And considering your macronutrients, if you're just starting off with nutrition, can be okay in the beginning because then you understand, what a calorie is and how much energy you're actually consuming. And that can be effective in looking at, well, oh my goodness, most of my calories is actually coming from these highly processed foods. And I didn't realize it's all packed into one. So if it's in a package and it has a lot of explanation and it's advertised with all these different types of colors, it's normally a highly processed food. So you want to go for the whole food option. If it's got a long list of ingredients, try find one with a shorter list of ingredients, one that exists closer to nature. And then considering the macro and micronutrients on the level or on the package is very effective in considering how you build a meal. So we already talked about non-starchy vegetables. They're not going to have a label on them. High quality proteins normally don't have a label on them either. There's no label on salmon. Sometimes in the tinned wild salmon that I get, which I love, there is a label on it. And there's, salmon and salt. So salmon in water and salt, which is a really low processing method. And then for the processed foods that you do eat 20% of your diet, consider your carbohydrates in it, consider the protein in it, and consider the ingredients list. And if the advertisement is on the package, maybe you want to look at the whole food version. Yeah.
So you mentioned a few times micro and macronutrients. Now let's get into what are those. Even though I know what it is, please explain it simply.
Yeah, absolutely. So macronutrients are associated with kind of the type of structure that it is in. So if it's a protein, if it's a fat, or if it's a carbohydrate, and fiber as well. And they're the type of food into a category and how they're broken down by the body to eventually end up as an energy source. And a macronutrient, protein and carbohydrates, exhibit 4 calories per gram, and a fat produces 9 calories per gram, and fiber almost nothing. In America, it's different to in Europe, this food labeling, because carbohydrates also takes into consideration fiber, and over there you have to take the fiber away. So if you're buying a food over there, it's different than over here, whereas we're blessed that it's just carbohydrates and sugar. And that macronutrients looks at where and how you break down your energy. Micronutrients are things that we learned about in school. So your vitamins, your minerals. So your vitamins and minerals, we all know, are calcium or iron, are then in the vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin B, and they're broken down into water soluble and fat soluble. And that's kind of great science to have. We need these macro and micronutrients as fundamentals, but then we also have these micronutrients that are polyphenols, plant chemicals, flavonoids, again, that come with a diverse range of plants in the diet. Fiber, prebiotics, other probiotics, micronutrients, little nutrients that are required in tiny amounts for overall human health, whereas macronutrients, we need them in large amounts. That's where micro and macro come from. When you go to choose a product, you want to look at it from a nutrient-dense perspective. For example, everybody talks about leafy greens and how healthy they are. And that's because for the calories that they provide so much micronutrients for so little macronutrients. And that's what a nutrient-dense food is. So the more nutrient-dense foods, whole foods typically, we can get in our diet, the better your overall health, your life is going to be. And this comes back to our point where there's myths about nutrition. If people are focusing on macronutrients and weight loss and things like that, it takes away from the power of what the micronutrients do, because they're more powerful than the macronutrients themselves.
I heard you mentioning the enzymes, which I also learned about as some micronutrients, and they're catalyzers of chemical reactions. So how they relate to food, plants especially, and how they help to digest the food. How does that work?
Absolutely. So all foods contain their own natural enzymes. And I think there was a science experiment, and most people have probably seen this, where, it's all over the internet, these kind of entertainment things where they take a processed food and they take a whole food. And let's say, for example, you take a tomato and then you take a McDonald's burger. You leave it in a completely kind of sterile area and you wonder, which disintegrates faster over time. The tomato disintegrates into nothing. But what's breaking that up into literally just the sugar, and then it's going to evaporate into the air? The enzymes that's present in the food itself. So if it breaks down quite quickly, fresh food produce that you need to buy every week, your vegetables, the enzymes are already there. So they are digestive helpers because you're eating them with the food. And what food processing tries to do is to stop the function of the enzymes. So when you put a food through a heat process, even fruit and vegetables are slightly processed, they go through a specific period of time where they blast them with heat, not too hot, but just they blast them with heat to inhibit the enzyme function so they can last on the shelves a little bit longer. And that's with organic and non-organic, because it would just disintegrate really, really quickly. Freezing does the same thing, stops the action of the enzymes. So getting back to the whole food, the more whole the food is, the more natural enzymes are going to be present, and they're going to be digestive helpers, okay? Whereas when you look at foods where they're burnt out of it, highly processed, your body is going to have to work harder to produce, to break down these foods in a certain sense. you're not going to get the aid from it as you are. You're not going to get the anti-inflammatories or the enzymes. Papain, the enzyme that helps to break down protein, is present in pineapple. That can help with breaking down proteins and things like that. So the more plant foods, the more enzymes you're going to get, and that's going to help with your overall digestion. Really important to eliminate the digestive enzymes that we have in our stomach function at a certain environment. So just like us, if we were put into extreme heat, would you be able to carry out your fitness class in extreme heat in the same level? No, you wouldn't. So the enzymes in your stomach and the enzymes in your mouth and the enzymes in your lower gut function at a certain pH, which is the acidic-basic ratio. And if that ratio has been interrupted, your enzymes are not going to function and your food is not going to be broken down as well. This is really, really important that I want to stress. When you have acid reflux, when that esophageal gland opens and the stomach acid comes up into the stomach and burns a tiny bit of your esophagus, reducing the stomach acid only helps temporarily. Your enzymes cannot function in this acid reduced phase. You need the acid in your stomach. So for your enzymes to function, it needs to be at a certain pH. And the acid in our stomach is one of the strongest acids in the world. It's about pH 2. And things that help to increase your acid in your stomach is by being fully hydrated. Stop taking Rene and Gaviscon and things like that, because you're reducing the stomach acid. So if you're wondering when you eat food and it gets to here and you get a pain, a lot of the digestion of the food breaks down in the stomach. You're putting but when you reduce that stomach acid, you're putting a lot of strain on the food and a lot of strain in the lower intestines, where your food isn't broken down properly, and it's going to cause ruptures and things then further on in your digestive system. So look at maybe the causes of maybe why you're not, producing, or why that's happening, as opposed to just reducing the stomach acid, because that's very important. So when you brought up enzymes, I thought, okay, let's talk about enzymes have to function in the stomach and also in the gut as well. So enzymes are present in whole foods, not in processed foods, and they are digestive aids. And stop taking the PPIs, the acid reflux medications. There's other ways to go about it.
And so the question here is, how does aroma in food really relate to any sort of effect, if we like food, or if the food is healthy for us, or if we gonna be repeating eating those healthy foods? How does aroma affect us in food?
So our experience of food is so factorial. It comes from so many different areas. And people always think it's about taste, but about 70% of our taste is actually in conjunction with the smells. So if you have no sense, so when food scientists are conducting, sensory analysis on a food product before they bring it to the market to ensure its success, they screen panelists, people who are going to be on the panel, for defects in, they have to have a sense of smell. If you don't have a sense of smell, which some people suffer from, you can't be part of the panel. So that shows you the importance of it. But because 70% is within the smell and not actually in the taste buds itself, there's about 2,000 aromas that we can remember, clock in our brain, and our aromatic memory has been proven in certain instances to be more powerful than our visual memory, our aromatic. I'll tell a story. I grew up on a farm, as I said before, and I don't know if you've seen these black bales wrapped up in this plastic. And there's a certain smell to the bales, as we call them, that is associated with that. And any kids that would come to our house or we were playing all together, we'd play on these bales. So that smell, I was running at home in the countryside, and the smell of these bales came to me, and it lifted me with a sense of, like, I was running up a hill. So it's, you know, when you're running up after 5-6 kilometers, your body's getting tired. And this smell came to me, and I smelt it. Brought me straight back to my childhood, like faster than the picture of the bales could bring me. And straight back to my childhood, a sense of play was evoked. So I started moving my body in a different way while I was running, as opposed to that stiff, you know, the stiff that you get. If anyone's a long distance runner, they'll understand it. You stiffen up in a way. And I started to loosen up, and I started to play with my step. And like, okay, so that evoked memory. It evoked visual memory. It evoked sociology and all of these positive experiences associated with that smell came back to me and impacted my next step on the run. So when it comes to sensory analysis connected to food, it's more important than smell. There's 200 tastes that we can have. And there's 2,000 aromas that can be in the world. And the really interesting thing about the aromas is, because they're so complex with so many different types of chemicals in it, scientists can't replicate aromas. Like I'll ask you now to consider like the smell of actual fresh strawberries and the chemical strawberry smell that you'll smell from kids' sweets. Do you have a memory of each? Do you have a distinction with each? They're very, very different. You cannot replicate that smell of fresh strawberries. You cannot replicate that smell of fresh grass. Not chemically, you never can, because it's too complex. So when it comes to food, tasting food, smells are so important. And you asked about the flavorings and the herbs and spices. They're also extremely important. So you can evoke memory smells from it, like the smell of potatoes cooking and that, you know, sulfuric, maybe starch, resistant starch in the air, whatever it is that the smells are coming out. It can evoke certain psychological responses that make you go towards that food even faster. I'll give an example. The smell of popcorn. You know, microwave popcorn is different to cinema popcorn. Which you're going to prefer? Maybe the cinema popcorn, because it is associated with like happy memories and you've clocked them. Because you can't really clock taste, but you can clock aromas in your mind and you can remember them. If you think about when did you have the COVID-19? Did you lose your sense of taste or smell? I did. And it was so strange. I was eating food and I couldn't taste it. And then it started to come back. Well, my sense of taste started to come back, but my sense of smell was still gone. But I noticed that foods didn't taste as strong. And then eventually the viral load had decreased and my smell taste started to come back and food became a lot more pleasurable. And it's amazing how our body does that, because if you think of us having a virus in our system as opposed to a bacterial infection, normally when you have a viral infection, you don't have an appetite. And in the case of the COVID-19 one, it took over your taste responses. Or did your body do that so you wouldn't eat as much? So you then could heal from it? You know, feed a cold, starve a fever. A cold is a bacterial infection. A fever is a viral infection. So is your body just putting a pause on that sense and reception that you can't smell? And so to allow, to allow you not to taste, so you don't eat as much, so your body has more time to heal and more energy to focus on, getting you through this virus that you have in your system. So smell is so important. And I think the takeaway from it is that we can remember smells, but we can't remember tastes. And because food is psychological as it is physical, as it is, sociological. If smells can give way for those experiences to be repeated, well, then hone in on them and listen to them.
You mentioned that we shouldn't basically avoid those with the long lists. But even though if we still want something and there's some major chemicals to avoid, for example, for me, it's always trans fat, to avoid aspartame and maybe saccharin.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us more about what are nitrates from processed meats. You can tell us something about these and why to avoid them. So maybe we can talk nitrates, trans fats, and artificial sweeteners. Maybe more if you know something.
Absolutely.
Really to avoid.
Yeah, so we have one taste that's at the top of our tongue called sweetness, and it's associated with sucrose, fructose, all your sweet tastes, saccharin, which is an artificial sweetener, dextrose. It's also associated with aspartame, sulfam K, and artificial sweeteners. And going back to intuitive eating and eating off intuition when it's connected to a food source. So a banana is sweet. It might be sweeter than a blueberry, for example, because it contains more calories. So our responses are triggered and we want to eat more of the banana maybe. There's more calories associated. We put higher priority on sweeter foods. And that's important for us way back when we were hunter and gatherers. And when you have a chemical sweetness that isn't derived from nature or isn't present in a food naturally, first of all, it's not natural. It's an added ingredient. So it's taken away from your own sense of what sweetness should be. You're going to crave more and more because that receptor becomes dimmer and dimmer to the sense of sweetness. So when you have this receptor that is really highly, sugar-based just on the tongue, but it doesn't match up in the body, that's going to create some kind of chemical imbalance, because that is a chemical imbalance. If you taste something and you're expecting a certain amount of sugar that comes with that in nature, and it doesn't match up in the stomach, that's not going to be good. And also because aspartame and sulfam, although deemed in respect of the quantities that are present in foods, non-harmful. Maybe over time, if you're continuously having them, they can cause harm. They do disrupt the microbiome, which of course is, 70% of our immune system. And it has a direct link with our state of our mood, depression, anxiety, all of that. So for me, again, coming back to the whole foods, no whole food contains aspartame or sulfam or saccharin. They're added for the sole purpose of having that sensory response in the mouth, and allowing you to accept the food as opposed to doing anything else for you. So for some, it can help them, come off 3 cans of Coke a day, and now they're on Diet Coke and they're eating less calories. And so in turn, they might lose a little bit of weight. But because they're disrupting the chemical pathways that normally exist when an animal eats something sweet, consequential, it's not going to have a long-term good effect on your health. When you talk about processed meats, again, and I'm going to keep on coming back to the whole foods, meats don't exist in those extremely processed manners. They exist so those chemicals are there to preserve the meat. They're not there to benefit your health. So they're there to give a certain smell, a certain texture, and so that the shelf life lasts longer. And if they're repelling bacteria out in the open, of course they're going to repel bacteria as well in your gut. So that's not going to be good. There was another ingredient that you mentioned. So that was nitrates and the processed meats, the trans fats. Again, going back to the whole food, trans fats don't exist in nature. They are normal fats that have been taken and have been broken down by oxidation, extreme heat therapies, to make them into a form that is unnatural. And your body is going to respond according to that unnatural response. And so your body will produce an unnatural response to that. They have actually increased the rate of heart disease as opposed to help it. And again, nutrition is always an evolving science. So they thought they were doing something good by removing saturated fats and making them into trans fats. We now know it's the opposite, the absolute opposite. We now know it's not fat that causes, heart disease only. It's a multitude of things, including nutrition and lifestyle. But yeah, coming back to the whole food, trans fats do not exist in nature. They have to go through severe processing to reach that stage. And when you release a fat from its natural state, these, oxidative components are going to be released, and they're going to disrupt your own chemistry within your body in not a helpful way. They're proven to be carcinogenic. They're proven to contribute to heart disease, to diabetes. So as much as you possibly can, just stay away from them. They're present in, if you get, chipper foods, they're present there. Fast foods, they're also present in quite cheap, like biscuits and highly, highly processed foods. If you eliminate them entirely from your diet, you're not eating them for the trans fats. You're eating those types of foods for the sensory taste or whatever. If you're going to go entirely eliminating on them and then you're just going to go and binge them at a high level, that's not going to be beneficial either. So 80% whole foods, and then the minuscule levels that you eat in that 20% shouldn't have too detrimental of an effect if everything else is really positive and really unoxidizing.
How does our daily diet affect our mental health and also mood?
Yeah, great question. There's a direct link between it. There is absolutely no denying the link between what we eat and our mood and our mental health. There are functional foods that have been proven by just adding to them to your diet alone, like omega-3 fatty acids, so wild salmon, sardines, anchovies, adding those to the diet 3 times a week are very effective in treating depressive disorders, anxious disorders. Magnesium-rich foods are also effective. B vitamin-rich foods, fibers. There's a direct link between your gut microbiome and your feeling of happiness. So most of your serotonin is made in the gut by these microbes. So that's why you should protect these good microbes. The vagus nerve connects your brain to your gut. If you compare the matter size of your brain and the matter size of your gut, they're the same. So we've got 2 brains. The brain that we have direct control over is our gut. We don't have direct control over our brain. We cannot control, well, maybe with advanced technology we'll be able to, which I think Elon Musk is on. We cannot control the brain, but we can control the second brain. We know how to feed good bacteria. We know that there's probiotic foods that help. We know a diverse range of plant foods significantly help. We know high quality protein and high quality fat is, it's not only needed, it is like it's paramount to having a healthy functioning hormonal system, and in turn nervous system, and then of course direct links to mood, cognitive functioning, all of that. There's millions of studies on rats and adding certain foods to their diet, adding certain microbes into their gut, and the beneficial effects that have. So if you have control over your second brain, why would you not want to make that positive? And in turn, then it will definitely affect your mood and your cognitive function and your hormonal system. Absolutely.
Just to touch on that topic, so how do you repair damaged microbiome?
Yes.
So that gut flora, especially, let's say somebody took antibiotics maybe repeatedly and never took any sort of repair mechanism. So let's say also part of the question could be, do probiotics really help, or is it mostly like we should have fermented food and mostly healthy plant-based diet? Well, a lot of plants.
Absolutely. Brilliant question. So again, the food first approach to health. So food first before you even consider probiotics. Now, antibiotics have been designed in a way that regardless of what you eat, they're going to be effective in decreasing the number of the harmful bacteria that is in your system. So the disease that has taken over, the bacterial infection that has taken over. So regardless of what you eat, your bacteria count are going to reduce on this antibiotic. And in turn, as a side effect, you're going to decrease the number of healthy bacteria as well. And that can cause an imbalance of good bacteria versus bad bacteria and just low bacteria in general. And so as a rule of thumb, if you're taking an antibiotic, if you have to take an antibiotic, always question it, but if you have to, then definitely take a probiotic with it. If you are a healthy individual on a day-to-day basis, eating a wide 30 plus plant foods a week, wide variety of fresh, whole food, plant foods, probiotics by eating fermented foods, and mostly just focusing on those kind of plant foods and then fibers and different diverse range of fibers. That is the only thing that's proven to increase your diversity when it comes to your gut microbiome. Not probiotics. Now, there are certain specific probiotics that are in scientific research that have been shown to help with a certain condition, that standalone bacteria in that standalone form, but they're not really accessible on a day-to-day basis. So, yes, of course, eat fermented foods is going to increase the number, but you got to feed them and you got to bring in diversity. And the only way to do that is by eating different types of plant foods. And so if your method is avoiding meat, because, you could get to the stage where you're eating 3 steaks a day and increasing, the hunger for other foods by not eating the meat anymore. So therefore you need to rely on other types of foods, which is more plant foods. That's an effective mechanism for you. It might be beneficial for a person who has been on antibiotics, or if somebody comes to me and I see, oh my God, okay, there's been no diversity whatsoever here. Maybe in the beginning, let's start on a probiotic to just get that back in balance. But ultimately, the aim would be to increase the number and range of plant foods that you'd be eating. That's the proven mechanism from time and time again, not probiotics standalone yet.
Can you discuss the implications of a high sugar diet?
So there's different forms of sugar. Sugar is not sugar is not sugar. It comes in different forms. If you're talking about the refined high sugar diet, which is called the kind of SAD diet, so full of refined carbohydrates. So you're waking up in the morning, you're having cereal that is fortified with X, Y, and Z, because in order for it to be classified as a food, it has to be fortified. It has to give up some nutrients, not just the carbohydrate. And then for lunch, you're having a packet of crisps and a sandwich. And then for dinner, you're having rice and a steak pie. And then for dessert, you're having Pringles and ice cream. And I think everyone can relate to that type of a diet because it's so easy. Like, we just buy it. We don't have to do any work with it. And we're always going to relate back to something that's easy. So that high processed diet is directly linked with every disease there is, dietary and chronic illness that there is. Everything. It is an inflammatory diet. And if inflammation is the basis of most diseases, inflammation in the brain, inflammation in the nervous system, inflammation in the gut, inflammation in the liver, then why would you do that to yourself consistently? And it's not your fault because science has gone into making it so enjoyable. But everybody knows if they eat that type of food continuously, they don't feel good. And then what happens is they're trained for the quick fix. So they're trained for the quick fix when it comes to food in front of their plate. They don't want to eat, they don't want to cook their meals. So it's right there in front of them. They're trained to get that quick fix of sugar. They're trained, quick fix. So then what happens is when it comes to eating healthier, they're trained to get that quick fix of weight loss, to get that quick fix of, you train yourself to get a quick fix in everything that you do if you get a quick fix in your food. You train yourself to want the quick fix. I want to go on a cleanse now because in 1 week I'll lose all this weight. You train yourself to take a pill because that's the quick fix in fixing all your problems. So if you consistently train yourself in getting the quick fix when it comes to food, that highly refined sugar, that is going to pour into every other aspect of your life. It just is. You're not working hard for your food like us human beings are designed to work hard for. You're not smelling it as you should. You abolish your intuition, your taste buds, your receptors. You sanitize your gut microbiome. So if you have an option to come out of that, then take it, because there's so much that you can, there's everything, every aspect of your life can be benefited from coming off a highly refined sugar diet. And if it's that you have to work on your mental health first, or you work on your physical health first, whatever it is that gets you started, just get into it and then get off it. Because it doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit you, those around us. It doesn't benefit you. It doesn't benefit your mental health. And it's directly linked to all diseases. I'm not talking about fruit, by the way, which is another controversial topic, but I'm talking about highly refined, high sugar products. We know the dangers of it. And instead of thinking it like, oh my God, I really want a chocolate bar, but now I feel so terrible because it's inflammatory and all this type of stuff. Stop thinking about the hunger and think of like food as an opportunity to do something cool for yourself. Like, it's not scary. It's just an opportunity. If you want to contribute to your inflammation, cool. Well, I don't know why you would.
I said this is going to be the last question, but I have one more here. Mm-hmm. What about cheese? Mm-hmm. Overconsumption of cheese, or having cheese with every meal because it's so tasty, it's salty and it's this kind of like sour flavor to it. Yeah. And if somebody possibly have intolerance and they don't know about it, I'm a bit of a cheese addict,
Yeah.
So what are the consequences of having too much cheese,
Yeah. So, well, it's quite a kind of difficult question. For you personally, you would have to look at, is it stopping me from getting a variety of foods into my diet? Because it's quite calorie dense. It's quite high in protein. It's quite high in fat, not so high in fiber. It's also a fermented food, so we can remember that cheese is a fermented food. So your structure of dairy has been slightly changed. But it's a concentration of dairy fat, which fat is kind of, and it's omega-6 fat, so it's quite inflammatory. It also has this chemical release in the brain system, something of, it's quite addictive as well, similar to sugar, because we, instead of just that sweet taste receptor, we also have fat receptors, taste receptors. And again, the salt receptors are very important. And so cheese has been designed, it's actually kind of an art. I mean, if there's a cheese addict, you have a cheese board, it's absolutely amazing. Not going to spike your blood sugar levels as much as sugar would, but it's quite inflammatory. And you might have a sensitivity towards dairy, you might not. But is it taking away, is it kind of wasted energy in that if you're having quite a lot of cheese, most likely it's going to take away from eating other types and varieties of food. So, you can have cheese on crackers. You feel perfectly satisfied. Whereas you could have had a salad with some anchovies and some quinoa, all for the same kind of calorie, if you're talking calories in this similar calorie category, you're equally satisfied with both. And then I'll leave that question up to you, which is going to benefit you more.
Thank you so much for your extensive educational content. You were absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers will totally enjoy this and possibly put it on repeat a couple of times so they can actually digest
I love it.
properly the important information you have shared. It was absolutely amazing. You are so knowledgeable. Now, where can we find you on social media?
Absolutely. So on social media, you can find me at BIA, B-I-A, the Irish for food _ability. My website is biaability.com. You can also find me on Facebook at BIA _ability. And I'm not the best at TikTok, but I'm getting there. I think I might stick to, I'm still there. You can contact me directly through, a message on my website and also through Instagram. I do hold one-on-one clinics, diary analysis, and also some health coaching food programs as well. And thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing. I've learned so much about my knowledge, and just from even our conversation about, Emer and, coming off different types of food. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Emer.